This is the story of a king who ruled the world and then lost his mind. A man who built golden palaces but ended up crawling in the dirt. His name was Nebuchadnezzar, and he thought he was unstoppable until God showed him who truly ruled heaven and earth. The desert wind whispered through the palace garden, brushing past the leaves of the fig trees and making the torches flicker. The king was barefoot again. He stood in a shallow pit of sand he had ordered to be built right in the middle of his courtyard. There was no one else around, just him and the statue. The statue wasn't large, it wasn't even impressive, but it meant everything. The head was gold, the chest silver, the belly bronze, the legs iron, and the feet a weak, cracked mix of iron and clay. It was a sculpture of a dream that haunted him, a dream he couldn't forget. He stared at it in silence, lips tight. Then, suddenly, he spoke. "They don't remember how I began," Nebuchadnezzar muttered, kneeling down to brush sand from the feet of the statue. "They only see the king I am now. But once, I was just the general's son." His fingers curled into fists as his eyes glazed over, drifting backward in time. Flashback. He remembered being 17, standing on a hill outside Nineveh, his face streaked with dust and blood. His father, King Nebuchadnezzar, had handed him the sword after Babylon's armies crushed the Assyrians. "Your time has come," his father had said. And it had. Nebuchadnezzar rose like a storm, conquering city after city, building towers that touched the sky, dragging kings in chains to bow at his feet. His name made whole nations tremble. He rebuilt Babylon until it sparkled like a jewel in the desert. The hanging gardens, he built them. The giant gates of Ishtar, his idea. Everything they said was impossible, he made happen. He had everything. So why couldn't he sleep? Back to present. He stood up and looked down at the statue again. "That stone," he whispered. "The one not cut by human hands. It smashed it all, not the head, not the chest, but the feet, the weakest part." The breeze stirred the sand around his ankles. The city buzzed in the distance, but he didn't move. "I'm the head of gold," he said out loud. "The top, the finest, the strongest." But even as he said it, he knew, deep down, that something was coming. Something bigger than him, something he couldn't control. The stone floor was cold beneath Nebuchadnezzar's feet, but he didn't care. He had marched through the palace halls all night, thinking, pacing, growling at shadows. Servants had scrambled out of the way as the torches flickered, and his robe dragged behind him like a lion's tail. The dream would not leave him alone. He paused before a bronze mirror and stared at his reflection. Strong jaw, fierce eyes, a crown heavy with emeralds, but all he could see was the statue, the dream statue, and the stone that smashed it. "Why the feet?" he muttered. "Why not strike the head?" He turned sharply and walked toward the Hall of Fire, his private room where he went to think, rage, and pray to gods he wasn't sure listened. There, already sitting cross-legged on the floor, was the boy. No guards had announced him, no messengers had let him in, and yet, there he was, calm, waiting. Daniel, the Hebrew. He wasn't really a boy anymore, maybe 20, maybe a little more, but he still had that quiet look that made people nervous, the kind of quiet that didn't come from weakness, but from something deeper, something unshakable. "Did I summon you?" Nebuchadnezzar snapped. Daniel looked up slowly. "No, king, but I was told in a dream that you would need me." The king's jaw clenched. "You're not the first to say that." "I don't speak for the gods of stone and fire," Daniel said, standing to his feet. "I speak for the God who made them." Nebuchadnezzar narrowed his eyes. "You say you know my dream," he growled. "Say it wrong, and you die." Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer, almost as if he were more concerned for the king than afraid of him. "You saw a great statue," Daniel said, voice steady. "Its head was gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Legs of iron, feet of iron and clay." The air in the room shifted. "And then," Daniel continued, "a stone was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the feet of the statue and shattered the whole thing to dust, but the stone grew into a mountain and filled the entire earth." Nebuchadnezzar felt his heart stop. He hadn't told a soul, not one word. And this Hebrew prisoner, this exile, spoke it as if he had seen it himself. Daniel stepped even closer. "You, O king, are the head of gold. You've been given power, strength, and glory by the Most High God. He placed people, beasts, and birds under your rule, but your kingdom will not last forever. Others will rise after you, each weaker than the last." The king's mouth was dry. Daniel finished, his voice soft but sharp. "In the end, the kingdom of God will crush all others. And that kingdom will never be destroyed." Nebuchadnezzar stood frozen. The head of gold. That was him. But the stone would outlast them all. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar crawl into his chest. Not fear, not pride, humility, just a flicker. But it was there. The winds of Babylon were strange that year. They howled across the plains one moment, then whispered like warnings the next. Nebuchadnezzar stood at the edge of the plain of Dura, arms crossed, his crown catching the morning light. Before him, rising like a golden storm cloud, stood the statue. 90 feet tall, pure gold from top to bottom, shining brighter than the sun. It wasn't just a monument, it was a declaration, a challenge to the heavens. "No silver, no bronze, no clay," he muttered. "Only gold. Only me." Even as he said it, something tight coiled inside his chest. That dream, the statue, the stone, the shattered feet still followed him. He had tried to forget it, tried to rewrite it. So he built this statue, this idol, to erase the fear, to prove that no one, not even heaven, could break him. The music began, horns, flutes, drums echoing across the plain like thunder. Thousands of officials stood waiting, judges, governors, scholars, generals. The king's voice had thundered out the command earlier. When the music plays, bow to the statue or burn in the furnace. The music soared, and knees hit the dust. All except three. 3 young men stood tall among the sea of bowed bodies, still, unmoving, like towers in a storm. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes locked onto them. His heart didn't race. Not yet. Instead, a slow heat crept up his spine, half surprise, half fury. He recognized them. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel's friends, men he had promoted, men he had trusted, men who knew the rules. They weren't rebels, they weren't enemies, they were his own. He almost admired them for standing so boldly, almost. "Bring them," he said, barely above a whisper. When they stood before him, their faces were calm. There was no shaking, no begging. Nebuchadnezzar stepped down from his high platform and studied them closely. "You eat my food," he said. "You wear my robes. You lead my provinces. And still, You defy me." One of them answered quietly, "We serve the king above all kings." "I'm giving you a second chance," Nebuchadnezzar said. "When the music plays again, bow. Or I will throw you into the fire myself." And then his voice cracked into a snarl. "What god will be able to rescue you from my hand?" The men looked at one another, and then together they answered, "We don't need to defend ourselves to you. If we're thrown into the fire, the God we serve can save us. But even if he doesn't, we still won't bow." Nebuchadnezzar's vision blurred. "Heat it hotter," he shouted, "7 times hotter." The furnace roared. Flames leapt into the sky like wild beasts. "Bind them!" the king ordered. "Now!" Guards rushed forward, wrapping ropes around the men's arms and shoulders, but even as they dragged the 3 toward the blazing pit, something began to shift in the air. The fire no longer sounded like fire. It roared like a living thing. The first soldiers who touched the furnace screamed. The heat exploded out like a wave, knocking them to the ground. They died before they even got close. But the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were thrown into the fire, and the world held its breath. Nebuchadnezzar stumbled backward, shielding his face from the heat, but he couldn't look away. Inside the furnace, something moved. His eyes narrowed. He counted. 1, 2, 3. Then froze. 4. There were 4 figures walking in the fire, not crawling, not writhing in pain, walking. And one of them shone like lightning wrapped in human form. Nebuchadnezzar's knees nearly gave out. "Didn't we throw in 3?" he gasped. His guards, those who were still alive, nodded, wide-eyed. "Then why is there a 4th?" No one could answer. But deep down, Nebuchadnezzar knew. And for the first time in his life, the king of Babylon felt very, very small. The fire didn't touch them. Not a single thread on their robes was scorched, no burn on their skin, not even the smell of smoke. But the 4th figure, that was what silenced the earth. Nebuchadnezzar gripped the stone railing, leaning forward until his knuckles turned white. "It's not a man," he whispered. That thing. It's not a man." The being moved with calm authority, like he belonged in the fire, like the flames recognized him. He walked beside the 3 bound men, and with one gesture, the ropes fell away. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood tall, free, surrounded by fire, untouched. The flames raged, but they bowed to him. Nebuchadnezzar stumbled back. He had crushed cities, snapped kings like twigs, conquered gods made of gold and silver, but this was different. He ran toward the furnace, closer than any king should ever go. His crown nearly tumbled off his head. "Shadrach!" he shouted. "Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out!" The flames didn't resist them. They simply stepped out calmly, like men leaving a garden. The entire court stood frozen. Nebuchadnezzar reached out, touched one of their robes. It was cool. Software. No burn. No ash. He looked them over with wild eyes. "Not even a hair is singed," he said. How is this possible?" Shadrach didn't speak. Neither did Meshach or Abednego. But they didn't have to. The silence said everything. Nebuchadnezzar turned to the crowd. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from something even stronger. Awe. "Praise be to the God of these men," he said loudly, pointing at them. "They trusted him. They defied me. And they were right." He took a deep breath. His voice steadied. From now on, anyone who speaks against their God will be torn limb from limb. Then his lips twisted into a half smile. And I'll promote these three. They've earned it. He turned to leave. The crowd erupted behind him. But as he walked back toward his palace, something strange happened. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel in control. He had seen power, real power, and it didn't belong to him. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in his chambers, tossing beneath his silk blankets, staring at the ceiling. Not even the royal musicians could soothe him. The image of the fourth figure in the fire kept replaying in his mind. Who was he? Why did he walk through fire like it was air? And why did Nebuchadnezzar feel like he was coming for him next? He closed his eyes and whispered into the dark, I'm the King of Kings, aren't I? But even he didn't believe it anymore. The nightmares came back, but they were different this time. No statue, no stone, no crashing. This time, it was a tree. A towering tree that stretched into the sky, its leaves glittering like emeralds, its branches heavy with fruit. Birds nested in it. Beasts lay in its shade. The whole world seemed to rest beneath it. Then, without warning, a voice thundered from heaven, cut it down, strip its branches, scatter its fruit. Nebuchadnezzar bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat. The dream continued even as he woke. He could still hear the words echoing inside his skull. But leave the stump, bound in iron and bronze. His hands trembled. This wasn't just a dream. It was a message. Again. He refused to speak of it the next day, not to his scribes, not to his magicians, not even to his closest guards. He walked the palace in silence, eyes hollow, lips pressed tight. Something about that tree, his tree, being chopped down made his chest tighten. The tree had felt familiar, too familiar. He tried to ignore it, but the dreams didn't stop. Every night, the same vision, the same voice, the same final line. Let him live with the animals until 7 seasons pass over him. On the 7th night, he snapped. Bring Daniel, he said. This time, he didn't wait for the wise men to fail. He didn't stage a public gathering or test a dozen false prophets. He wanted truth. Daniel entered quietly, eyes calm as always, as if nothing surprised him anymore. I had a dream, Nebuchadnezzar said, pacing like a trapped animal. A massive tree, a voice from heaven. It's cut down, but the stump is left. He paused and looked Daniel straight in the eyes. I think it's me. Daniel didn't speak right away. Then slowly, carefully, he said, You saw greatness because you are great, O king. That tree, it is you. You've become strong, your reach stretching to the ends of the earth. Nebuchadnezzar almost smiled. But Daniel wasn't finished. And yet, he said softly, you are warned. Your pride has grown taller than the tree, and if you do not humble yourself, you will be brought low. The room fell still. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes narrowed. How low? Daniel swallowed. You will be driven away. You will live with wild animals, eat grass like cattle. You will lose your mind until you acknowledge that heaven rules above you. The king didn't say a word. He stood, walked to the edge of the room and stared out at his city, the ziggurats, the glowing towers, the river slicing through the earth like a jeweled ribbon. Driven away, he said under his breath. Me. Daniel bowed. O king, Let my advice be pleasing to you. Break off your sins. Show mercy. Maybe your prosperity will continue." Nebuchadnezzar didn't answer. Not that day, not the next. For a whole year, he stayed exactly the same. No change, no repentance. If anything, he became prouder. 1 year. That's how long the warning sat in his chest like a sleeping lion. 12 months of sunlight, applause, and golden fountains. The hanging gardens overflowed with color. The palace marble was polished until it sparkled like ice. Servants bowed, generals praised, poets wrote his name in starlight. And nothing happened. No voices from heaven, no burning statues, no more dreams. Nebuchadnezzar began to smile again, then laugh, then forget. The silence, he thought, was a sign of approval. He walked through his city wearing white robes with golden embroidery trailing behind him like the river that ran through Babylon. He gazed at ziggurats that pierced the sky, temples carved in pure lapis, and towers that reflected the sun. "This," he whispered, raising both arms over the kingdom, "this is mine." He stood atop the royal balcony, the wind catching the edge of his cloak like wings. The whole city sparkled below him, streets, gardens, gates, towers. "Is not this the great Babylon I have built?" he declared, "by my power, for my glory." The moment he said it, the sky cracked. It didn't rumble. It spoke. A voice, not of thunder, but of authority, deep, calm, final. "O King Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdom is taken from you." He froze. The wind stopped. The ground beneath him pulsed. "You will live with the beasts," the voice continued, "and eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass over you until you know that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men." Something shifted in his mind. A single thread unraveled, then another. Then the whole tapestry came apart. The robe slipped from his shoulders. His arms dangled like vines. His breath grew ragged. He dropped to his knees, then to his hands, gasping. He opened his mouth to shout, but only a sound came out, not a word, a growl. He crawled across the balcony floor. His guards didn't move. His officials stood frozen. One servant dropped a golden plate, and it shattered like thunder. The Lion of Babylon was no longer a man. He howled, clawed at the ground, and fled. Through the gardens, through the palace gates, into the wild. They didn't stop him, because how do you stop a curse? He disappeared into the fields, barefoot, foaming, tangled hair streaming behind him like a banner of madness. And the city just watched. The throne room stood empty. The crown lay forgotten on the palace floor. The fountains kept flowing. The scribes kept writing. The statues kept standing tall. But the king was on all fours, face down in the grass, chewing. Time became a blur. Days vanished into heat. Nights dissolved into dew. And Nebuchadnezzar, once called King of Kings, forgot his own name. His palace was now a patch of earth beneath a tree. His crown was a tangled nest of thorns caught in his hair. The dew soaked his back each morning like a blanket from heaven, though he no longer knew what heaven was. His fingernails had grown long and curved, claws now, not hands. His skin was leathered and wild, caked with dirt and scars and sun. He didn't speak. He grunted, snorted, roared at birds that flew too close. Sometimes he'd find a smooth stone and whisper to it, convinced it was his son. Other times, he'd chase shadows across the field, thinking they were enemies trying to steal his kingdom. But there was no kingdom, only grass and silence and wind. The animals didn't fear him anymore. He was one of them now, a beast among beasts, just another creature under the sky, a stranger to himself. Yet, something remained, not a voice, not a memory, just a flicker. A single ember buried beneath the madness. At night, when the stars blinked down like curious eyes, he would tilt his face upward. Something in him longed to climb back, but he didn't know how. He didn't even know he had fallen. Then one morning, he didn't know which, he rose from the dirt and looked up again, but this time, he didn't look as a beast. He looked as a man. The wind shifted. The birds quieted, and a single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and landed on his face. He blinked. The ember inside him flared. He didn't know why, but he lifted his arms, slowly, trembling, crusted with earth, and whispered something he hadn't said in years. God, Most High. His voice cracked. His knees buckled. He collapsed. And in that moment, like a whisper passing through the trees, the madness began to lift. Not all at once, not with a shout, but gently, layer by layer, as if heaven had been waiting, not to crush him, but to carry him home. The world looked different now, not because it had changed, but because his eyes had. The blur of beasts and grass began to clear. The ground didn't feel like home anymore. The dirt beneath his nails, once a crown of survival, now felt foreign, like borrowed skin. And the sky? Oh, the sky. It used to be a ceiling to him, something he stood beneath. But now it felt like a throne above him. Nebuchadnezzar sat still, legs folded beneath him, the wild in his hair slowly giving way to peace in his chest. He didn't know how long he had been there, how many seasons had passed, how many moons had watched him crumble, but he knew one thing. He was not God, and he never had been. He raised his eyes to the heavens, not with anger, not with pride, but with reverence, with trembling. And then he spoke. His voice was hoarse, cracked like old stone, but every word glowed. I bless the Most High, he whispered. His breath came out in clouds, though the air was warm. I praise and honor the one who lives forever. His kingdom is the only one that lasts. A breeze swept through the field, cool, refreshing, like a breath straight from heaven. He felt it in his bones first, a loosening, a quieting. Then in his chest, a calm. Then in his mind, clarity. The fog lifted. The roar inside his head stopped. The war within him ceased. He blinked and remembered who he was. But this time, it wasn't a throne or a title that defined him, not a robe, not a crown, not the marble walls or golden halls of Babylon. He remembered that he was dust and that God was not. Far away, the palace towers shimmered in the distance. His throne still stood. His kingdom had not crumbled, but the man who returned to it would never be the same. He stood to his feet slowly, no longer a beast, no longer the builder of idols, but a man restored by mercy. And as he walked back toward the city, barefoot and quiet, a whisper followed him. Not a voice from the sky, but from within. You were broken, so I could make you whole. They didn't recognize him at first. He walked through the lower gate of Babylon with no fanfare, no guards, no trumpets, just dust on his feet and light in his eyes. A few merchants stared as he passed, narrowing their eyes. Some squinted, rubbed their faces, then gasped quietly. Mothers pulled their children close. Soldiers froze with their hands halfway to their swords. They had heard rumors, whispers of the king gone mad, that he'd been eaten by wolves, that he'd become one, that Babylon's crown had fallen into the grass, never to rise again. And yet, here he was, thinner, older, but stronger somehow, not in muscle, not in presence, but in something harder to name, something settled. He walked slowly toward the palace, past marble pillars and great burning braziers. He paused at the golden gates. The guards looked uncertain. Then one of them fell to his knees. "Your Majesty," he whispered. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't correct him, nor did he bask in the moment. He simply walked inside, hand tracing the carved wall where his own victories were once painted in gold. He passed the throne room, stopped. It was empty. The throne had been untouched, its velvet cushions now covered in a light layer of dust. A crown sat atop it, tilted, waiting. He approached it, but didn't sit. Instead, he stood in front of it, arms at his side, and bowed his head. "I rule nothing," he said quietly, "not without you." There were no trumpets, no cheering crowd, but heaven heard. And slowly, the palace began to stir. Officials entered, one by one. Ministers, scholars, captains. Not one of them dared speak first. Then, quietly, Nebuchadnezzar turned around and faced them all. His voice echoed not with volume, but with weight. "I once believed I was untouchable, that kingdoms bowed because I was worthy, that glory belonged to me." He stepped forward. "But now I know, heaven rules, all power, all greatness. It flows from the hand of God." He paused, searching their faces. "And if he can restore a man like me, then no one is too far gone." He looked down at the throne again. Then finally, he sat. Not like a conqueror, but like a servant placed back in his seat by mercy. And Babylon was ruled once more, but this time by a man who remembered the field. Babylon looked the same, but Nebuchadnezzar saw it differently now. Every brick, every fountain, every glittering gate once whispered to him, "You did this." Now they only reminded him, "You were allowed to." He walked the city each morning. No guards, no fanfare. He stopped to listen to builders, to bless farmers, to speak kindly to servants whose names he never cared to learn before. And the people? They stared. The king who once shouted now listened. The king who once commanded fire now spoke of mercy. One day he passed the statue, the golden giant he had built on the plain of Dura. Its face had weathered, its shine had faded, but still it stood tall, casting long shadows across the earth. He looked up at it, then turned away. He didn't need it anymore. Later that evening, from the top of the palace, he called the court together. Governors, princes, scribes, foreign dignitaries, they all gathered, wondering what decree he might speak now. He stepped forward, no robe of gold, no scepter in hand, just a man with a calm voice and clear eyes. "This is not about what I have built," he said. "It is about what I have learned." The room went still. "Pride nearly destroyed me. It disguised itself as greatness. It wore my crown. It filled my heart, but it was hollow, and it could not save me." He looked up, past the pillars, past the torches, past the ceiling. "There is a king who sits above kings, a ruler no throne on earth can contain, and I—" He paused, smiling. "I am only great because he is merciful." Some gawked, some wept, some bowed. And far away, beyond the courtyards and gardens, a single shepherd boy whispered to his flock, "The king has changed." The years that followed were quiet, not weak, not small, just peaceful. Nebuchadnezzar no longer chased applause. He no longer measured greatness by gold or towers or how many nations feared his name. Instead, he measured each day by something simpler. Did I remember who I am? Did I remember who he is? He still ruled, but differently. He asked more questions. He listened more than he spoke. He promoted servants who were honest, not just clever. He forgave more often. And when others knelt before him, he gently lifted them back to their feet. Sometimes he still wandered the garden barefoot, his counselors puzzled by the habit, but to him the feel of warm soil reminded him of the field, of the madness, of the moment God found him in the dirt and didn't leave him there. He wrote often now, not laws, not decrees, but songs. Songs of the Most High. They weren't sung in temples or shouted at parades. They were whispered in the homes of shepherds, scribbled into the margins of scrolls, and passed quietly from father to son. He had no interest in building another golden idol, but he longed to build a testimony. And that, he realized, would last longer. One afternoon, as the sun lowered across the city, he climbed the outer balcony of his palace. Babylon glowed beneath him, fields swaying, towers sparkling, the river glinting like a silver thread through it all. He breathed in deeply. Then he spoke, not to a crowd, not to a scribe, but to the wind, to the sky, to the God who had broken him, then healed him. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar," he said, "praise and exalt and honor the King of heaven, for everything he does is right, and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride." He placed a hand over his chest. "He is able to humble." He didn't say it with fear anymore. He said it with joy, because now he understood. Nebuchadnezzar didn't live forever. His days, like every man's, came to an end. Not in fire, not in battle, not with a kingdom crumbling around him, but in peace. There was no parade the day he passed, no thunder from heaven, just the steady breeze through palm trees, the soft rustle of garden leaves, and the warm hum of a city that had finally found rest beneath a humble king. Some said his final words were a whisper. Others said he lifted his eyes one last time and smiled. Either way, what mattered most wasn't how he died, but how he lived after the fall. The servants remembered him differently, not as the man who once built golden towers, but as the man who picked flowers for sick children in the courtyards. Not as the king who demanded worship, but as the man who sang softly in the gardens at dawn. The children of Babylon grew up hearing his story, not just of power, but of transformation. They didn't just know the king who ruled the world, they remembered the man who lost his mind and found something better. A God greater than thrones, a mercy deeper than madness, a truth stronger than pride. And the statue? It still stood in the desert, forgotten and wind-worn. But no one bowed to it anymore, because one man's brokenness had taught them all a better posture, not kneeling before gold, but lifting their eyes to heaven.